Hey there, and welcome to this week's edition of The Wrap. State capture crooks in jail? Yes, please. In this week's edition, we're delighted to say that the NPA is at last cracking on with its critical work now that the Zondo Commission has wrapped. We also celebrate African talent doing amazing work on the global entertainment stage, a South African first in clean energy, and how NFTs are being used to partially redress the historical theft of African art. Plus, we unpack why things look particularly difficult for public sector workers this year, as they're asking for a big increase in a tough economy. We explain what you need to know and why there are not necessarily any easy answers or sides to take here. So, let's dive into your weekly update of empowering and easy to understand news brought to you by myself, Verashni Pillay, and the Explain.co.za team. First up in our take, Accountability Monitor. The NPA is finally on a roll. Shamila Batoy is starting to understand the brief. The head of our National Prosecuting Authority realizes that South Africans are impatient for accountability. More than 3 years of testimony at the Zondo Commission laid bare the incredible extent of state capture. But the question remains, when are people going to jail? I mean, you guys have been hearing testimony after testimony about how bad things were, and you're probably wondering the same. So Batoy made a splash on Tuesday about how the NPA has collaborated with the Commission and the work done so far by its super sleuthing department, the Investigating Directorate, otherwise known as the ID. The ID has managed to enroll 20 cases. Now, what does enroll mean? It means that they've gotten those onto the court roll and obtained a date for hearing. This is a big deal. Getting a case ready to be heard by a judge takes a fair amount of work, and the state prosecutors must be confident of the evidence they're presenting. The 20 cases that have been enrolled involve 65 accused people, all linked to state capture. Now, the NPA says that 9 additional corruption matters are being prioritized for additional enrollment within the next 6 months. Well, what is the ID? It was gazetted by Ramaphosa in 2019 to address exactly this issue of accountability. It's done good enough work at this point, and the NPA is now calling for it to be made a permanent structure. So Batoy made all these announcements while appearing before her organization's relevant oversight committee in Parliament. She also assured the country that the ID was back on track after the surprise departure of its former head, Hermione Crenier, which you might remember happened last year, and there was a bit of an outcry. And she said that the new person has taken over and it's been seamless. But look, this is not the first time that the NPA has made a big announcement about state capture prosecution, so we might have to take it a little bit lightly. I mean, in February this year, Justice Minister Ronald Lamola said that the NPA was looking into 37 cases linked to state capture and that 14 had been enrolled in court. It's not clear if these 14 are included in the latest announcement of 20. Nonetheless, prosecutions generally are an important step when it comes to accountability for state capture. I mean, think about how Explain.co.za launched. When we launched in 2019, one of our first videos was telling you that successfully prosecuting crooks, which is a precursor to putting them in jail, is difficult, and that we should give the NPA some time, hollowed out as they were after the Zuma years. But fast forward 3 years later, and like the rest of the country, our patience wore thin. We told you at the end of last year that the NPA was coming under increased scrutiny. Civil society group Open Secrets has previously lambasted the organization for delays and failing to deal with dodgy remnants of state capture within its own ranks, prosecutors who were not loyal to the current cause of democracy, who were proven to be bottlenecks and stopping things from happening. Now, the NPA and its ID may have big plans going forward, but the real question is, can they get the money and capacity to go after the 1,200 people and organizations implicated in Zondo's report? On Tuesday, Batoy asked for an additional 1.7 billion rand. I mean, this is an organization that needs highly skilled technical expertise to do these kind of forensic financial audit reports. And those kind of skills are not always available in the country. They've got to go abroad and hire that. It costs dollars and euros, or they've got to get very expensive people in to do it, because once they're there in the court in front of a judge, they need to have a solid case to present. So that's why they need that much money. The experts have agreed that this amount is necessary for both the organization and South Africa to rebuild. Without it, fewer crooks will go to jail. It's one of the best uses of our public money that we can think of, so we say give the NPA the money and let's get more cases enrolled. Moving on to the big story, unions and government face off. A battle over money is brewing between public sector unions and their bosses in government. Public sector unions, which speak on behalf of more than 1.3 million teachers, nurses, police officers, and other public servants, have asked for a 10% wage hike. The problem? South Africa's purse strings are tighter than ever. 10% is a big figure. It's nearly double inflation, which is at 5.9% this year. Plus, it's being demanded in a year when many other South Africans have had to navigate salary cuts or freezes. Business Maverick notes that the demand is high by historical standards too. Hikes have typically been agreed at 2 percentage points above inflation. But the unions say that they're making up for the past. Over the past 2 years, public servants were not awarded inflation-linked wage adjustments because Treasury had embarked on a wage freeze, a union boss told Business Maverick. Now, the public sector wage bill currently accounts for the biggest share of government spending. President Cyril Ramaphosa's administration is under pressure to cut spending. This is key to bettering our credit rating, which in turn means cheaper loans to fix state-owned enterprises, build infrastructure, and so on. In fact, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana vowed in his inaugural budget speech this year to keep the public sector wage down. So this 10% hike, if given, would cost the state 66.4 billion rand. An early demand of 7% would have cost just 46.6 billion rand, about 20 billion less. Now, unions have also asked for a number of other changes to how things are usually done when it comes to negotiations with government, including negotiating year by year instead of for 3 years at a time, as is the current case, because it helps the government plan. They usually do these 3-year wage negotiations, but now unions are saying we want to negotiate every year. They're also trying to get a document in place that will bind government to whatever has been agreed. And all in all, it feels like the stage is being set for a bitter battle. Business Day quoted a source in the presidency as saying that these sort of demands amount to labor unions spoiling for a showdown. It's worth noting that these unions lost their case at the Constitutional Court in February to force government to implement backdated wage increases of about 8% in 2020. As Carol Payton notes in Fin 24, this came after government did the previously unthinkable, breaking an existing wage agreement and freezing public servant wages at the time. As she wrote, this caused enormous anger and can hardly be seen as anything less egregious than a violation of the social contract. Trade unions generally are less organized and weaker than they once were. This means desperation, which is not likely to lead to good outcomes for any of us. We're sympathetic to the likes of nurses and teachers who earn far too little for the important work and onerous work that they do, but balancing those needs against a troubled economy is a tricky business. Government is expected to respond to the wage demands next Thursday, so we'll update you in the next wrap. Moving on to your briefs, digital repatriation brings looted African art home. For centuries, colonial powers stole countless pieces of art and other cultural artifacts from African countries. Trying to repatriate those treasures has proved an arduous task, though at least some museums and cities are coming to the party. But one young Nigerian man is not prepared to wait any longer. He's decided to, quote-unquote, loot African art right back. He won't break any laws to do so, though, nor stage a heist straight out of a Mission Impossible film. Instead, the art will be turned into non-fungible tokens, NFTs. An NFT, as we've previously explained, is a digital asset that represents real-world objects like art, music, in-game items, and videos. They are bought and sold online, frequently with cryptocurrency. So the Nigerian man in question is called Chidi. He prefers not to share his surname. He and 3 colleagues are set to launch their website called Looty tomorrow. The name is stolen from a pretty eye-popping moment in colonial history. Looty was a Pekingese dog given to Queen Victoria after the British looted one of China's most important palaces in 1860. Yeah, pretty on the nose. So as part of their digital repatriation, the Looty team has visited museums in France and the United Kingdom to snap pictures of stolen art pieces with their smartphones. These images are turned into NFTs, which is really like a once-off digital kind of piece of real estate. Their earnings will be used to support artists across Africa. On purchase of any piece of artwork on Looty, they say 20% of that will go to the Looty Fund. From that fund, we are going to start giving grants to artists from the continent. We will donate money and equipment for artists to use, says Chidi. We're excited to see what Looty achieves in its quest to empower today's African artists. Onto some local political news. The ANC's Eastern Cape Conference chaos is a sign of things to come. Forget about calculus, trigonometry, or Einstein's theory of relativity. Nothing is more complex than the ANC's internal voting processes. You'll be hearing a lot about these procedures in the coming months because the party's national elective conference is set for December. That's where the future of both the party and the country will be decided. Last weekend, the Eastern Cape leg of the conference got off to a rocky start after a faction backing Babalo Madikizela headed to the Eastern Cape High Court to prevent certain ANC branches from taking part. Things became increasingly nasty, but somehow delegates managed to get down to business. Oscar Mabuyane was re-elected as the party's Eastern Cape chairperson. ANC President Ramaphosa gave a closing address in which he praised conference delegates for proving their critics wrong. This despite the chaos that marked the conference. Ramaphosa will be feeling upbeat about Mabuyane's win and will hope for the same continuity elsewhere. Success for his allies at the provincial level will be key to his aspirations of winning a second term as ANC president. But as News 24 explains, while Ramaphosa is widely expected to emerge victorious in December, it won't be easy. EWN has put together a handy guide that explains how new leaders are chosen at the ANC's provincial conferences. Political animals may want to print it out and stick it to the fridge. After all, when the government party sneezes, the rest of us invariably catch a cold. So it's worth understanding the process. We've put a link to it in the WhatsApp version. And on the website. On to some international and African entertainment news. A Rwandan Doctor Who and a shining South African star. African talent soars. The next Time Lord is from Rwanda. If that sentence makes zero sense to you, you're obviously not a fan of the long-running BBC TV show Doctor Who. It's a combination of science fiction, action, gothic horror, and dark comedy, and its titular character has been played by 13 actors. Number 14 was announced this week. Ntsuti Gatwa, who plays Eric Effiong in the hit British comedy Sex Education, will step into Doctor Who's time-travelling shoes and time-travelling device, the infamous TARDIS. Gatwa is the first person of colour cast as the Doctor. He was born in Rwanda and moved to Scotland with his family in 1994 to escape the genocide that tore his home nation apart. The show has taken some important strides in the representation stakes over the past few years. In 2017, Jodie Whittaker made history as the first woman to play Doctor Who. Gatwa is her replacement. Speaking of time travellers, Elizabeth Moss of Handmaid's Tale fame, is starring in an adaptation of The Shining Girls, which is a novel by South African acclaimed science fiction author Lauren Bukes. The novel is about a Depression-era Chicago man, Harper Curtis, who finds a key to a house that opens onto other times. There's a dreadful, brutal catch, as the book's blurb explains. He has to kill the Shining Girls, bright young women burning with potential. Grimly true to life, right? The adaptation is streaming on Apple TV+. Bukes has expressed her excitement at Moss portraying one of her characters. She said, "When they told me Elizabeth Moss was on board, I was hugely excited. She's such a phenomenal actress," Bukes told Esquire. Moss is not the only global star involved in this project. Leonardo DiCaprio, whose production company acquired the rights to develop the show for TV, is also credited as an executive producer. We love seeing talent from Africa rocking the world stage. On to some sad news. Gadi murder, a stark reminder of South Africa's femicide shame. It's a horrible fact. South Africa has one of the world's highest femicide rates. Women and girls are under attack, often by the men who claim to love them. These murders crowd news headlines every week, and sometimes a story crashes into the public consciousness because of its sheer brutality or the people involved. You've probably heard the name Hilary Gadi by now or seen photographs of the smiling young woman. A quick recap. The 28-year-old Gadi, whose father is a former EFF Secretary General Godrich Gadi, was reported missing on the 29th of April. She had last been seen at a shop in Nelspruit's Central Business District. Days later, her body was found amid some bushes near Mbombela. Police Minister Bheki Cele was quickly on the scene. He activated a 72-hour action plan. It worked. 3 men were quickly arrested for Gadi's murder. One suspect, Philemon Lukele, is a researcher for the office of the ANC's Mpumalanga Chief Whip. He, Sipho Mkhatshwa, and Albert Gama have already appeared in court and charged with conspiring to murder the young IT student. Gadi was buried on Saturday in Kamahuhu in Nelspruit. She was remembered as a fighter. As her father said, "From the moment you were born, you were named after great women leaders of the world, for in you we saw a bright future. Little did we know that you'd die a tragic death." The police's 72-hour activation plan has been used in other cases and exemplifies the kind of swift, focused police work that can deliver justice to victims, their families, and communities. It should not be the exception, and it can't exist in a vacuum. Massive structural changes are needed to tackle the combination of patriarchy and toxic masculinity that drives femicide. On to some international news. A Palestinian journalist's shooting has sparked global outrage. Just last week, we marked an important occasion, World Press Freedom Day, which falls annually on May 3rd. This makes the fatal shooting of veteran Palestinian-American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh in the contentious West Bank yesterday even more galling. Abu Akleh, an Al Jazeera correspondent, was shot while covering a raid by the Israeli Defense Force on the West Bank's Jenin refugee camp. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said Israeli officers, or rather forces, are fully responsible for her death, and he has vowed to approach the International Criminal Court to demand an investigation. Israeli officials, meanwhile, say that the 51-year-old reporter was killed in an exchange of gunfire, but they have not yet determined who fired the fatal shot. A state service was held in Palestine this morning to honor the reporter. Her death comes nearly a year after an Israeli airstrike destroyed a building in Gaza that housed the offices of Al Jazeera and the Associated Press. Journalists covering conflicts are protected by international humanitarian law, and other reporters who were with Abu Akleh when she was shot said that she was targeted despite wearing a jacket that clearly identified her as a member of the press corps. Could this be because she was Palestinian? Abbas is correct. A robust independent investigation is needed so that Abu Akleh's killers can be brought to justice. Journalism is not a crime. Finally, a hydrogen truck powers miners towards a greener future. South Africa's mining industry took a big step towards a carbon-free future last Friday when Anglo American unveiled the world's largest hydrogen-powered truck in what President Cyril Ramaphosa described as a historic moment for the future economy. The fully hydrogen-powered 220-ton truck is intended to be the first of a fleet of similar vehicles that Anglo American hopes will reach its goal of becoming carbon neutral by 2040. The truck uses solar panels to provide the energy required to split water into hydrogen and oxygen molecules. The process has the potential, says the mining giant, to remove up to 80% of all carbon emissions that are currently created through its existing global fleet of diesel-powered trucks. At its unveiling in the Mogalakwena mine, about 250 kilometers outside of Johannesburg, Ramaphosa said, "This is a gigantic leap for South Africa's hydrogen future economy." Hydrogen has often been labeled the fuel of the future thanks to its abundance in nature and its clean-burning nature that emits only water vapor. Investment bank Investec believes that there is huge potential for investment in the green hydrogen sector particularly, which is the cleanest form of hydrogen energy. In an investment note recently, it noted that South Africa was well endowed with renewable sources of energy and was poised to become a leader in this field. As Ramaphosa noted, what we are launching is not merely an impressive piece of machinery, it is the genesis of an entire ecosystem powered by hydrogen. Much more must be done to mitigate pollution in the country's large industrial sector, particularly the mining industry, but this is a good move, and alongside last November's historic pledge from the UK, France, Germany and the US to offer South Africa over $8 billion in technical assistance to help us move towards a low-carbon economy, this sets us on the right path. So that's it from us at The Wrap, an award-winning product of Explain.co's simple news summaries for busy people. This wrap is sponsored by Explain's agency division, who specialize in content marketing for purpose-driven organizations, often with a pan-African reach. Mail info at Explain.co to get right through to me, Verashni, for a quote. Remember to share the love, tell your friends to sign up for the updates at Explain.co/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from the team.